And we're live. It is Tuesday, December 23rd, year of our Lord 2025. It is 8 o'clock a.m. in Miami, as it is in Norfolk or Virginia Beach, or the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, as it is in Washington, D.C. It is 2 p.m. in Kiev, where Nastia may join us. She said she would join us if she could ask more legal questions. Um, and it is not quite moving day for Mike Feinberg, but that is coming soon. And I hope and pray that you are having a good day, because the sun is shining, the birds are chirping. It is going to be a great fucking day. And you are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a goddamn revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features is that sometimes the show is, um, is random. Like, it didn't happen yesterday because honestly, I wasn't feeling that great, and I felt more like rolling into bed again than out of bed. And so I just said, no, it's not happening today. And then sometimes, like today, it just happens. It's 8 o'clock and it happens magically. And sometimes it happens on my laptop when I'm traveling. And sometimes, like today, it happens on my phone. And these are just random things that take place. Um, and that's one of the things about the show. Another one of the magical features of the show is that, sometimes Mike Feinberg shows up because he has made arrangements for the little monster, as he calls his offspring. And sometimes that doesn't happen. Today it happened, but the little monster may show up as well. All of which, as might Ava, uh, if Nastia shows up, all of which is a long-winded way of saying that we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to have a random show from uh, different continents with different babies and or different little monsters. And Nastia, Mike, welcome, welcome to Miami.
Welcome to Kyiv, Ben.
Good morning.
So when is the moving day, Mr. Feinberg?
Monday. The movers come Monday morning. They pack everything up, load it on a truck, at which point I will get in my car, drive probably to Richmond, stop for the night, and then get to the new house the next morning in the DC area, and the movers will come that afternoon and start unpacking.
Wow.
Are you
Nastia,
excited
I am fucking thrilled, yes.
that the process is over?
I'm exhausted, don't get me wrong. This is not a fun week for us, but we're both very excited to get back to somewhere we like a little bit more, just culturally, and also, I've moved around a lot, and this is the first time as an adult that I'm going to be moving somewhere, first of all, with what is now my whole family, but also with no future moves inevitably on the horizon. Like,
What was the rationale for the move, if that's not a private question?
No,
Like,
it's
where
fine.
did you live before and why are you moving to DC?
We're in Southern Virginia right now, in an area that goes by many names, but basically like the Tidewater, Hampton Roads region. And we were here because my final assignment with the FBI was being the number 2 in charge of the Norfolk field office.
Okay.
Given
So you were there for work.
We were there for work, and then when I left, my wife still had to finish her job, and just we weren't able to make the move happen until now. But
Okay.
her family is up in that area. everything I care about professionally and culturally is up there. So it was pretty much a no-brainer.
You mean in DC where you're moving? The
Yeah.
family and the cultural connections? Okay, cool.
Yeah. I
Okay,
just,
fun. I
yeah,
love DC.
I mean, I like it where I am now, but like, there's no theater scene. There's only one really good museum.
Yeah, that's not
it's
the
hard
same
to
as
find
DC
good
at all.
concerts. Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
So,
Ben, I
Nast
interrupted you when you were asking something, yeah.
no, Nastia, you said you had more questions. What is on our agenda today?
Yes. Every time I have some sort of like work meeting or an interview and I describe to people here in Ukraine what lawfare is, I always really flex like how important we are because nobody here knows it. And then everyone expects me to be a legal genius, but I'm like, no, no, no. Everyone else on the team is a legal genius. I'm
Not
just
everyone,
kind
trust me.
Yeah,
I'm like, we have former, FBI, White House, whatever kind of people. I'm just like a random addition. And I have zero like legal background, which is why I use this time to work on my legal understanding of the world. Um, I've been
so
reading. Go ahead.
no, so what are you thinking about?
So I had questions about. Uh, so I've been doing more research about NABU for the story I'm working on. And so one of the critiques they've gotten in the past is their how to even phrase that? I don't know how to phrase these things. Like their violation of people's presumption of innocence, where, for example, they'd put out a statement after an investigation, and the statement's wording would give away like the name, or not necessarily the name, but it would kind of allude to who the official is that they're
Well,
investigating,
they did
which is a
that just the
problem.
other day.
What did they do the other day?
Well, they put out, a lengthy statement with a description of the whole scheme involving this.
Oh, the thing that I
Um,
wrote about,
yeah,
Midas.
exactly. I
Right.
mean, that's not that's
Yeah.
something that normally in this country prior to this year anyway, the FBI wouldn't do.
So
It
here you
would
go. So
just
so my question is like, what is the so so essentially my question is like, what is the normal standard of like behavior when it comes to these things for these agencies? And then also, uh, how does one really like it seems like a very vague and difficult thing to determine whether you violated it or not because the Ukraine's high anti-corruption court issued several rulings where it said that NABU violated this principle. And in each instance, when I was reading it, I was like, huh, that's like kind of subjective, which I don't know, maybe a lot of the law is like that. It's all very kind of like somebody's interpretation of it. But anyway, does that make sense? Like I'm just struggling whether there's like a clear-cut rule or if there is a gray area here.
so
Yeah, clear.
mostly like a presumption of innocence is a law in the sense that you're not convicted until you're convicted, right? But when you say an investigative agency in a statement violated the presumption of innocence, you're not usually talking about any law. You're usually talking about an expectation of behavior. It's a little bit more normative than that.
Mm-hmm.
And the FBI or NABU has a lot more things that they can say legally than are a good idea for them to say. They can legally release a whole lot of information. I don't want to speak for NABU here because I don't actually know them very well, but the Bureau can, without violating law, release a lot of information. It generally shouldn't, because it's not fair to people to do that. And then there are categories of information that it can't release, which are much, much smaller than people think they are.
Okay, I see. So let me maybe give you a specific example. Um, so, uh, so for example, yeah. So once the High Anti-Corruption Court found a violation of the presumption of innocence in a video distributed by NABU. They have like a YouTube channel where they publish these like dramatic videos about their investigations. And in that video, the detective did not name the person who they were accusing, but the context of the conversation and his categorically affirmative statements formed an idea of the suspect's guilt among a big number of viewers. So that's kind of a like that's a subjective statement, right?
Yeah, so I would start with the question, why does NABU have a,
YouTube
you
channel.
know, have a YouTube channel where
Oh,
it's
okay,
releasing stuff like that, right? Like,
okay.
um, if it is an investigative agency, not for purposes of shaming people, but for purposes of anti-corruption investigations, why the showmanship about it, right? And
Does
and
did like wait? So the agencies in the U.S. don't have anything like that,
well, the
or
Bureau has social media that it uses for, I mean, that it uses for uh, important announcements about
mm-hmm.
investigations. I mean, they've been horribly abused during this administration. Um, and, Kristi Noem has been putting up abuse films
Right? Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
ICE's channels and stuff. So, like,
Yeah.
but I think of
Under normal
those
circumstances. All of
under
my
normal
questions are under normal
circumstances.
circumstances. Yeah.
But I think of that as a bad thing that they're, doing releasing information for no reason about investigations that are kind of designed to say, look how great we are, or
Hmm.
designed to humiliate people. I mean, I don't think that's really what law enforcement should be doing.
Interesting.
So can I
That's like
throw
that's
can
please,
I,
yeah.
can I ask a complicating question, Ben?
Of course.
So you and I have talked a little bit about this. Where do you think law enforcement agencies should fall in terms of defending their work to the public?
Well, so yeah,
Because one big
that's where I was gonna go.
one really big complaint I had over the past 8 years or so was that bureau management was really reluctant to defend its casework and personnel outside of the most milquetoast statements in front of Congress you would ever hear. And as a result, a lot of agents got dragged through the mud and had their personal lives ruined. And a lot of cases that I think were very solidly predicated are now not believed by half the country. But I
Yeah.
don't
Mm-hmm.
know I don't know how you push back against that without at least getting close to the line of
Mm-hmm.
things that could be problematic under other circumstances.
Okay, so first of all, the way to do that, I believe in speaking on behalf of the agency. Um, and um, as you know, I've been very critical of Chris Ray for not doing a lot more of it. Um,
What do you mean speaking
that
on behalf of the agency?
so when the Bureau was under attack during the last 4 to 8 years, the director of the Bureau was largely silent.
Right.
And I thought that was terrible.
And then he
Um,
like left before they got rid of him or something. Is that the
yes, he
right?
resigned and hasn't said a word since in
Yeah,
public.
that's interesting
He's
behavior.
been, he's been, I think the technical term is a weasel.
Mhm.
Um,
I thought you
that
were gonna use
said,
the P word, but that's okay.
no,
I get the sentiment.
I don't do that. That said, I do think that, um, first of all, there's a difference when the director or the deputy director stands up and says something in public between that and releasing evidence, you know, and when you release stuff, you kind of make it available. Nobody's name is on it, right? And what I want it was for Chris Ray to stand up and say, look, here's what we did. Here's why we did what we did. Here's the part of it that I think in retrospect was a mistake, if any. Here's the part of it that I stand by. And, you know, the I want names and people's prestige attached to that. When you just dump information out in the public in a contextless fashion, look, there's a role for that, but it's generally not before somebody has been charged. It's generally not in the context of a you know, and I do feel differently if the person is charged than if the person is not. If the person's charged and saying things of, you know, then you have a process for releasing information. I don't
Okay.
know. There's no perfect answer to this question.
So there is a difference between if NABU charged the person and then is talking about that, and whether they did not get charged the person when they're talking about it.
Again, I don't know Ukrainian law, and so how these normative rules would operate in Ukraine is something that I'm not in a position to really address
But
very well. But for the
what's
United
the
States,
American?
look, I think there is no place for the FBI to be dumping shit about uncharged people in public. That is why I don't think the rush to release the Epstein files is the greatest, you
I think
know,
they just released another thing, by the way. I just got
yeah,
the
they're
New
going
York Times
I
thing.
mean, look, Congress passed a law that says they have to do it. They have to do it. If you ask me, do I think it is a good thing for us to be dumping investigative files
You think it's bad?
involving large numbers of uncharged people on matters? No, I do not think that is good practice. Now, might there be a reason that is so extreme, like in this case, uh,
There are some
that
ugly photos
you do
there.
it anyway? Yeah, there may be some reasons why you do it anyway, but it is not it, it is not generally speaking the way you want law enforcement to behave.
Okay,
What
so
am I getting wrong, Mike?
I think you're getting it right. I mean, I'm gonna. There's an added problem that we're facing now for the first time in the FBI's history, of which I'm aware, which is it appears at least possible that DOJ is often in possession of incriminating information that can result in charges, is choosing not to pursue charges, and it's falling to the other branches of government to make the statements about what DOJ may know. And everybody's going to assume I'm talking about the Epstein files. That's actually not what I'm talking about. I'm thinking of the alleged video recorded evidence of Tom Homan taking a bribe. I'm thinking of a number of mortgage fraud cases with frighteningly similar circumstances to those alleged against Letitia James, but which are not being pursued because they involve executive branch officials. Just we're the presumption of regularity is a term courts use to refer to the fact that they're generally not going to second guess DOJ on quotidian matters and pleadings. And they're generally going to take DOJ's statements at face value on other matters. And society has always operated the same way. I think we're in a really interesting and frightening period where neither courts nor society should be providing that presumption of regularity. And if we can't rely on that, then who should be speaking for the rule of law if DOJ has abdicated the responsibility? That doesn't totally answer your question, but
Right, and I think that's a very good reason why you might make an exception to the normative rule in a situation like the Epstein case, right?
yeah,
Where Congress might say, okay, we've got 1,000 victims, we've got powerful men who we know were hanging out on his island.
yeah,
The interests of disclosure trump, so to speak, the interests of the normal criminal justice process, particularly because he's dead. Um, uh, Now, I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest, but I can see that argument. I
mhm,
can't see the argument that the normal uh, that the rules don't have value and uh, we should you know have law enforcement that's dumping data for purposes of embarrassing people. That's which is kind of what Nastia is describing
yeah,
uh, NABU being accused of, rightly or wrongly. Now, there's an important thing to say, which is that you know Ukraine is different, and the um, and it's different in important ways, including that the problem of anti-corruption is so vast that you had to build this completely separate law enforcement architecture that, as she has described, is constantly having to war against the normal law enforcement uh, 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 architecture in order to function. And under those
And
circumstances,
that's why they're doing it.
there's a certain level of information war that may be legitimate, but you know, is it?
But that's a political
At,
statement. That's
it's a
not a
political
legal
statement,
thing.
and
Yeah.
well,
and I
we've
don't know what the rate. I don't know enough about the Ukrainian context to know
You will
whether
soon.
when and where that's legitimate. But it is a factor that we're not dealing with here.
but it's also, I think we should point out, a lot of people are going to assume, if they don't know this landscape worldwide, that Ukraine is the anomaly. It's not. We're the anomaly. I think
In what way?
there are many more countries where the anti-corruption investigative and prosecutorial organs of state are separate from the normal executive officers conducting law enforcement. And that's largely in
Yeah,
part,
it's like an international practice
it's
way
an
before
international
Ukraine
practice
began
that
doing it.
frankly was very much encouraged by American law enforcement, who was advising countries as the Cold War ended about how they should structure things. Um, the FBI was instrumental in helping former Soviet republics figure out how they should structure their criminal investigation agencies.
Right, and the most effective of those were astonishingly effective.
Yes.
Estonia,
Mhm.
which I believe in Transparency International ratings is one of now the least corrupt countries in the world,
Which is
um,
crazy.
which is crazy, right? You come out of it's 30 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, and they have a better, and I think a much better transparency rating than the United States. And some of that is, a law enforcement matter, but some of it is, their incredible work on digital government, which has just made it much easier to reduce all kinds of fraud. I mean, they've had just a remarkable run of getting a whole lot of the basic blocking and tackling of good governance right, and they're an incredible success story as a result of it. I don't
Either of
know
you know
about,
about Singapore?
well, Singapore is really complicated because it is the only country in the world, maybe in the history of the world, that has coupled a strong anti-corruption uh, with authoritarianism, and usually corruption and authoritarianism go hand in hand. But the Singaporeans have, a very well functioning, low corruption authoritarian state. And I have been suspicious of it for a long time because my ideological preconceptions don't allow that it should exist. But I
There,
have,
go ahead.
but it is remarkable.
Yeah.
They've been very effective in that regard.
So their anti-corruption bureau is also like a separate independent entity. It's supposedly one of like the earliest examples of that kind of body that was sort of one of the influences for the creation of NABU and stuff. But apparently, what I found very interesting is that in their anti-corruption law in Singapore, they actually have a presumption of guilt, where if which sounds crazy to me, but they have this thing where
Very Napoleonic.
if they have this thing where if a public official has any wealth that they can't explain, like where this came from, it's assumed to be like a bribe or something like that, and the burden is on them to prove that it's not the other way around, which seems like a legal anomaly, right?
Yeah, well, they also still do flogging. So,
Okay.
uh, you know,
Well, anyway, as far as
I'm not
anti-corruption efforts
sure,
are concerned, they're like champions and stuff.
I'm not sure we should look at Singapore as a model of fairness and justice.
They do have
Uh,
very low anti-corruption. They do have very low corruption,
I,
though.
I understand they also still do flog people. And I'm serious. Um,
And
Okay.
we laugh about that, but like it's really brutal. Like if you
yeah,
look
Oh,
into what it actually entails, I mean,
maybe
it
I'm
is
not gonna
bloody,
use this
like
example in my
literally and
article.
figuratively.
it's a brine-soaked cane. It is no joke.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't want to diminish Singapore's accomplishments in the criminal justice space. But I do think one should be a little bit cautious. If people overpraise Singapore the way they overpraise, Dubai
Or
and the
like
UAE.
China for building quickly. I love these examples. The
Yes,
Chinese can build
exactly.
a factory in a week, that kind of stuff.
Right. And
Right. At what
um,
cost are they
There
doing
is a
that?
phenomenal book about this that came out within the past month or two by Dan Wong, about China's ability and making the argument that the U.S. should learn from that. I think it's a terrible argument, but it's very well argued in this book and worth looking for anybody who's interested.
and what is the part of the argument that doesn't rely on extreme centralized power and the ability to waive all the regulations that are designed to protect other things?
That is the argument,
Well, Ben,
which is why I don't agree with it. But I'm just saying, like, it is an argument, and I've seen it made in its best form in this book. I
Yeah,
just
I've
not
seen it. I
whatsoever.
I recall that it was made about Mussolini a lot too, and I recall that it was made a fair bit about Stalin. Um,
wait, but
uh,
wait, apart from Mussolini and Stalin, isn't there a sort of a healthy version of this argument in the form of the abundance agenda and stuff? Less
well,
regulation, quicker building, basic stuff.
sure, but you don't need to revert to the Chinese model to say
Right.
that,
You're
right?
right. Yeah.
Like to say that
Yeah.
our system should be a little bit more agile and
Hmm.
should uh, you know, get certain regulations out of people's way in order to do
Hmm.
something. You don't have to. You don't have to get to Xi Jinping.
Right.
Um,
Okay, I have a specific example now about the presumption of innocence problem, if you're not bored of
okay.
that discussion yet. So when the Operation Midas was unveiled, the big energy scandal, they published several videos. And so this is what NABU does on their YouTube channel, where they have a detective who was, I guess, the lead detective on the case. After the investigation becomes public, they make this YouTube video where the detective stands in front of a camera and sort of describes the scheme that they've uncovered, right? They're like, this, like, a person X was like paying bribes to person Y, blah, 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 and sort of explains what happened. And so when Operation Midas happened, they had these like they also gathered like 1,000 hours worth of tapes, which was part of the whole drama of it. And so they published snippets of those tapes, and it looked. Now that I'm thinking more about the issue of presumption of innocence, this looks really bad because like one of the videos, for example, is about the person who was implicated in the scheme, who's codenamed Che Guevara, who is our former vice prime minister. Everybody knows that now. They haven't said it publicly. But the cover of the YouTube video is a blurred photo of this guy. And like, if you're Ukrainian, like you can make out who that is, first of all. And then also in the video are the tapes all of like his recorded conversations. And as far as I can tell, the voices aren't like tampered with.
And has he
Is
been charged?
I think so. Uh, but are you saying it like if they released it after he was charged, then it's not that bad? Is that
So I
is that what
think
you're
it's
saying?
much worse if they released it
Before charging him.
before he's been charged.
Let me check.
Um,
Okay.
you know, the
Because we can
why
recognize his voice as well, right? That's really bad.
right? What so why should a law enforcement agency be releasing disparaging information about a person they're not prepared to charge?
Oh, okay.
Would
It's
be
never.
my
Sorry, go ahead.
would be my initial question. If
Well,
they've
so
charged him
I
and
think
this
they
is
have.
information attendant to the charging,
Hmm.
then I don't know that I mind it very much.
I see. Because here they
But
say that in their statement, like in their little description of the video on YouTube, that they say that they've documented how members of this criminal organization were transferring money to the former vice prime minister of Ukraine, who was referred to as Che Guevara, who was codenamed Che Guevara. So they don't say first name, last name, but they do say that it's the former vice prime minister of Ukraine,
right, but so again,
which
I
is
would
again super
say
obvious. I assume they've
I
charged
I
him at
would
that point.
I would say it matters a lot if they've charged him. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, what do you think? This is very
Um,
interesting to me.
I apologize. I have a small creature stirring next to me on a playmat, so instead
That's
of
okay.
answering your question and being a good guest, I'm going to depart and entertain him for a bit.
Okay.
Right, that is the most answer that we're going to get.
Yeah.
Um, Small monster, behave yourself, and large
Okay.
Mike Feinberg, good luck with the move, and we will see you soon.
Talk to you guys later.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems to me to matter a lot whether the individuals have been charged. When at least again using sort of American standards here, when we charge people, you can release a lot of information attendant to the issuance of the
Hmm.
charges. If you don't charge somebody, I think there's a question, why are you releasing information about him at all? These aren't journalists. These are uh, and if you're prepared to make the allegation in public, why aren't you going to charge him?
So yes, I think they've charged him on the day that they released this.
Yeah, then I don't think it bothers me very much. I
Interesting.
I think if the you know um, then it's just a question of the format of the release of information. So if you had written this material up in the charges, everybody would say that's fine. So now you're
Mm-hmm.
giving a press conference where you're announcing the charges and you're saying what kind of evidence that you have. That's okay, right? Um, and so now you're just making a little video and doing TikTok format instead of
Yeah.
in a press conference. I think that's just the choice of medium. I don't,
Huh.
that does not
Okay. So as long as you've charged
trouble.
them, there is some freedom.
And, and as long as the information is in support of the charges,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, like, as long as it's reasonably related, like, you shouldn't be, if you've charged him with corruption, you shouldn't be, oh, and here's photos of him with a woman, not his wife, right? There has to be a relationship between the
Yeah.
information you're releasing and the charging instrument. But I think, it is an anti-corruption agency that's supposed to be charging and collecting and people in connection with corruption schemes. And part of that, there is a public dissemination of information component of that.
Yeah. It's it's very interesting to me how, like as we've just talked, as we've just discussed, that Ukraine has such a unique political environment where I assume NABU feels as though they have to do this, like they have to have this component of like to like put it very simply, they have to sort of cater to the young audience and like the me's of the world and like the activists and the civil society and like the young people who then become the crux of like the people who protested in the summer, right? When the government was attacking Nabu. They sort of have to have like a cool Instagram presence and stuff like that. And they do it because they feel like they need to do that to protect themselves. Like the civil society has to have an interest in what they're doing.
So I think that is
Very
right.
interesting.
But I think you also want to be very careful as a law enforcement agency of, you're not a politician, you're not, and, doing things um, for developing a constituency is a kind of dangerous political game that
Right,
you do have to play to some degree, but you also
right.
have to be very careful of. John Hawkinson, what is on your mind this morning?
Morning, Ben. I just thought I would remind you to remind people that, of course, the request to appear on screen button won't work because you're on your phone. But also to note that in some jurisdictions there are court rules about what kinds of disclosures attorneys can make, and those rules are binding on the government. That's certainly the case in Boston. That is in Massachusetts federal court, and I think
So
by local rules.
can you dumb that down for me? So there are some rules as to how, as to what you can say in your statement to the press, kind of thing.
Right. I wanted Ben to give me a sort of sanity check on how widespread those rules are. Um,
Yeah, so let's talk about normal federal practice. Normal federal practice is when you issue an indictment or an arrest, you do not say more than is in the charging instrument. So if you look at a press release associated with the indictment of so and so, it will track the indictment very closely, and it will generally simply summarize the indictment, and it will always um, uh, and it will not contain information that is not in the indictment. The solitary exception to that in normal practice, again, there are abnormal practice situations, is when they have something to say about how the investigation was conducted. Um, this is the result of a joint task force from blah, 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 and blah, 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 which has been working on this for 7 years or something. That is information that may not be in the indictment, but might be in a press conference or um, But generally, you're going to track the indictment very closely.
It's worth
Um,
noting here, though, that there is a very wide range of what an indictment might look like. They can range from, as we've recently talked about in the Comey indictment, almost no information beyond the number of the statute that you're being charged under, versus nearly 100 pages, maybe more, of text or supporting affidavits explaining what the conduct was and what happened. So
right.
Ben's statement
The
is
And
true, but it needs a little more context to understand.
and actually, can I pitch in
yeah,
there,
yeah.
Ben?
Go ahead.
If I understood correctly the case I'm bringing up now, then there was also there were cases in Ukraine where the defendant team, the defense, would demand that the court reads out loud the entire indictment, like all of the charges, which took like several years, like literally, because the indictment was like 700 pages long. And it was one of the stalling tactics to like make sure that by the time that the statutes of limitations passed, that like the case didn't reach the verdict. So it's like a thing that has happened in Ukraine.
Yeah, so you do
Does that
have
sound like a plausible thing? Like, can an
um,
indictment be that long
well, an indictment. I mean, look,
in the Ukrainian context?
I don't know what is a plausible length of an indictment in Ukraine.
Well, but we do
Uh,
know that 700 pages takes a day to read, not a year. So,
right. I mean, there are situations where you have a right to have the indictment read in federal court too, and sometimes people decide to be nudniks and do it, and so they read the indictment out loud. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it does take a little time, but not years. It would have to be,
Okay, there were literally
you'd have.
years. In this case, it was years. I will find the exact thing that I'm
Yeah,
referring
I
to.
mean,
Okay.
I would be confused as that would have to be like hundreds of thousands of pages of indictment.
well, or it
Um,
could be a deliberate choice to read one word a day for, I mean, going to an extreme and saying you're following a rule when you're really not. That's also possible.
but look, there are countries where, and the most prominent right now is Israel, where, cases take so long to litigate that, Bibi Netanyahu has been prime minister while under indictment and while under trial for years.
I mean,
And
it's not the case that we're not that country, Ben.
no,
This is standard practice in Ukraine as well.
I mean,
yeah, but
Everything
it's
takes
not.
forever.
But it's not, the United States and Israel are not in the same league in this
sure,
Yeah,
department.
but I mean,
yeah,
Trump is
yeah.
still under litigation in, the Second Circuit, and
No, no, no. Those are appeals.
it,
Those trials went relatively quickly
okay,
and in a
okay,
fairly
fair.
orderly fashion. Bibi Netanyahu has been on trial. Like there's an active
Okay.
trial. It's got to be like 4 years now.
That's
Um,
short by Ukrainian standards.
um, and I don't remember when it started. Somebody should look it up. But
Is it a
it's,
jury trial?
no, it's a bench trial.
Okay, here you go. So it was a 774-page indictment, and the court only met for a few hours every few weeks. So
ah,
it took nearly 2 years for the prosecutors to read a bunch of it.
well,
And it
that
was a specific
seems.
stalling tactic.
Yeah, well, that seems like the court should have gone into like done a little bit more meeting.
Well,
That's
obviously, what
why
its
we then
intention was,
created the
right?
high anti-corruption court, because the usual courts weren't like that. That's why we created the special court.
I mean, Nastia, from your story, I actually can't tell, possibly because I wasn't paying close enough attention, whether this was bad or good. That is, whether this drawing out of the reading of the indictment was to protect an innocent person from
Oh, no, no,
getting
no. This was like a
screwed,
horrible. No, no. This
or
was like the first. This was the first big fish of NABU. Like this was the first big corrupt
I'm just, I
official
guess,
that they got.
pointing out this could go either way.
Right. No, but in this case, it was this corrupt person's defense team who insisted on it, so that to drag on the trial.
And the court did not choose some method to expedite the process, like,
Oh, no, no. The court was also corrupt.
okay,
This was so Ukraine created. So we first created NABU, which investigated stuff. But then we realized that NABU can't work with the usual prosecutors because they're all corrupt. So we created a special prosecutor's office. Then the special prosecutor's office and the special detectives at NABU realized that they can't take these cases to a normal court because they're also all corrupt, which is why we created the High Anti-Corruption Court. But all of this took years to figure out. So by the time that this dragging on for 2 years thing about the indictment was happening, this was in a regular Ukrainian court. It wasn't the specialized anti-corruption court yet, which is why this was possible.
All right. I have got to wrap up a little bit early today because I have another matter to attend to in 15 minutes, and for which I should find a quieter location and more coffee.
Oops.
Nastia's power has just gone out.
Huh?
So she needs to wrap up as well.
It's fine. The power will be back on in like 10 seconds.
And folks, we might be back tomorrow. We might not, but we might. I like this new gamesmanship where I kind of decide 15 minutes before the show whether there's going to be a show. I don't know who the co-hosts are going to be. I don't know who the guests are going to be. I don't know even if I'm going to be there. But I hope if I am that you'll join as well. Talk to you later.